Okay, the time's 2 minutes past, so I'm going to make a start because there's quite a lot to get through this morning. So welcome to this session, everyone. For anybody that doesn't know me, my name is Esther Bromley. I work for Support Staffordshire, and I've been working quite closely with the Supportive Communities team over at Staffordshire County Council to both develop and deliver a series of different sessions for you, of which, of course, today is mental health awareness. So hopefully this is the one you expected to be on. Just a bit of housekeeping just before we start. First of all, you have all come in on mute. That doesn't mean to say I don't want to talk to me. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or make a comment at any point. But if I can just ask you to remain on mute for the remainder of the time, simply because there's a lot of background noise, and quite often I can hear my own voice coming back at me, which puts me completely off my stride. I'd also ask you to bear in mind that this morning's session is being recorded. Now, it's not recorded in a way that we can see anybody's faces or anything that's said in the chat, but if you do speak, obviously it will be part of the recording. I've already said about your name, so just make sure I know who you are. Please do ask questions or make comments via the chat as well. So if you're not familiar with Zoom, the chat function looks a little bit like a speech bubble. It's either at the bottom or the top of your screen, depending on your device. You can just pop a message in there and I will just look at it every now and then and make sure I'm answering any questions that you may well have put in that box. You do get a copy of the slides from today's session, so everything that you see in front of you, you will get in your inbox. It won't be today because the person who sends it out is off today, but it should be happening on Monday. Within the slides, I've embedded a lot of different links. So I'm going to show you a couple of videos today, and I'm also going to show you some resources towards the end. Now, that just shows up as an underlined piece of text. So when you click that, it should open in the web browser of your choice. So please bear that in mind when you get it. So you don't need to write anything down or any web addresses or anything like that. Evaluation. Now, I have got a short poll at the end of today's session. So I asked two questions. First of all, have your skills and knowledge changed as a result of today's session? So can you do a little bit more than when you started? And the second is, has your understanding changed as a result of today's session? So can you do a little bit more than when you started? If you can complete that, that would be lovely. Just helps us make sure that we're doing a reasonable job. If you can't see it, don't worry. Some devices, some computers, depending on your security settings, don't show those up. So if you can't see it, don't worry. A longer evaluation will be coming out with the slides. If you can complete that, that would also be great. Just helps us understand if we can do things a little bit better, and just give you some more information that you need as well. If you want to introduce yourself, please use the chat function to do so. So you can pop on there who you are, what your role is, and what organisation you're from. That's fine. You don't have to do that. That's not mandatory, but sometimes people like to see who else is on the call. The final thing to mention is obviously we are online. That does come with the occasional hiccup. So if you're starting to struggle to hear me and it's a problem my end, just stop me and let me know, because I won't know for a little while after you've noticed it, and I'll just try and sort it out my end. If it's a problem your end, what you can do is keep your video off. I can't see any of you anyway, the way that I have my screen, so it's irrelevant to me whether I see your faces or not. That can just improve the speed of things getting to you, and it's particularly useful when I show the videos. Worst case scenario, the whole call drops off, or I disappear or you disappear. Just log back in on the same link, or just stay on the link and I will come back in my end. Okay, so that's all the housekeeping done. Just wanted to finally mention, and this is an additional bit to most of the ones that I do on here, is a little bit around the ground rules, I guess. And I suppose because it is quite an emotive topic, mental health, and we do cover some topics this morning, I will talk about some things that may be upsetting to hear. It may affect you personally. That's not unusual. Most people have experienced some form of mental health issue, either themselves or with somebody else that they know. So it can bring up feelings that perhaps you weren't even aware of. So if that happens, please do feel free to drop off the call. Just make sure you're okay. Talk to somebody your end, talk to somebody that can support you as well. If anybody does want to mention anything, it doesn't usually happen in these sessions, but if they do, if we can just like remove names or anything like that, then that would be lovely, and just maintain confidentiality of people, because we don't need to know the personal details of anybody. Okay, so that's just a bit of ground rules there. So what are these sessions about? Well, they were designed really to give anybody working or volunteering or supporting older people, particularly in any way, shape, or form, in any particular role across Staffordshire. And I know, having done many of different sessions now, that we get all sorts of people on this call, from people who are befrienders, people who work or volunteer in libraries, people who just helping their neighbours, people who are in the community help points, people who are in churches, people who are support workers. The list is enormous. And so it is an overview of different topics. It doesn't go into anything in any depth. And bear in mind that perhaps not everything will be relevant for you. So what I always say is, take from this what is right for you and what is relevant within your role. But hopefully during any of the sessions that you do, you'll pick up some good hints and tips or resources that perhaps you didn't know were there in the first place. So today is mental health. This isn't going to make you an expert. I can't do that in an hour. It isn't going to make you a mental health first aider. That is a qualification that takes 12 learning hours to achieve. I can't assess you in any way, so I don't know if you're listening to me or you're wandering off and having a cup of tea. So I can't assess your learning, but it does give you an overview. And what it does, it gives you an overview. First of all, what are different mental health issues? What do we mean when we say certain terms? And I've got a couple of videos that are going to demonstrate a couple of quite common conditions that perhaps people get a little bit wrong. And really importantly, we're going to talk about how to support someone who is struggling. So what do we say? How do we communicate? How do we help somebody that we are seeing is starting to really have an issue? I'm also going to show you at the end a couple of well-being tools and practices. So what is it out there that is available for you to do, either with yourself or to support someone else to maintain their own well-being as best as they can in some really trying and difficult conditions that we've all been living in within the last year? And the final thing is, I've got lots of resources, lots of places for you to have a look at, read things in a lot more detail, find out what helplines are out there, what support is out there, both locally and nationally. So that's what we're going to cover today. So a lot to cram into an hour. So I'm going to start by giving you a couple of statements that are said by Time to Change. If you've not heard of Time to Change, it's led by Mind and Rethink Mental Illness, and it's basically a social movement that is designed to really break down the stigma of mental health illness. Now, I talk about mental health issues, mental illness. There's lots of terms for it that we can broadly say, but we all understand the similar sort of thing that we mean when somebody is starting to struggle in some way or other. One thing they say, mental health is just as important as physical health. I couldn't agree more. I wish it was just health, actually, broadly health. Doesn't matter if it's in the mind or if it's in the body. Essentially, people can become unwell in either area, and both are equally important. Absolutely, mental health problems are common. They really are. 1 in 4 of us, that's a couple of us on this call, will experience a mental health problem in any given year. And that's a fact in normal times. We don't know the figures for how the last year has been, but I can only assume and be pretty confident that it's going to increase. So 1 in 4 of us every year, but they can be treated. They can be treated by some simple self-care. It can be treated elsewhere with help and support, but it's about getting that support in at the right time. Small things absolutely can make a big difference when it comes to mental well-being generally, and hopefully at the end I've got some hints and tips around there. Yeah, so talking about mental health, it's still a stigma. Hopefully we're opening up a lot more about society now about mental health, but it can take courage. Some of the facts and statistics that come out is people wait up to a year sometimes to tell their family and friends, so those who are closest to them, before they say, do you know what, I think I'm really struggling. I think I've got a problem. So for us in our roles, supporting and helping other people, asking those questions, making sure that somebody's all right is so key. And actually, it's quite often easier for people to talk to somebody who's not so emotionally involved with them as people like friends and family. It's easier for them to open up a little bit better. Yeah, we all totally need support sometimes. And goodness me, that's been very true in the last year. It's been a bit of a roller coaster. And I can't be the only one who sat there. And some days I've thought, yeah, I'm ready to take on the world. I'm motivated. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then the next day it might be, oh, it's another day. It's all the same. It's all, going wrong. I don't know where the end is and all the rest of it. So we all do need support sometimes. So I mentioned a few things about stress, which I'm going to talk about as one of my first topics. Yeah, so it's about looking out for signs of unmanageable stress from those around us, but also within ourselves. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, recognize stress within ourselves. We need to find better ways to care for ourselves. And there are some simple things that I'm going to go through them at the end, and they are quite simple things, but they do make a difference. Yeah, so stressful situations absolutely builds up, whether that's a big stressful situations or lots and lots of little things that build up and all pile on top of each other. And we can be constantly exposed to it, particularly people like yourselves. If you're out there doing a role where you're supporting people quite vulnerable, maybe they're, struggling themselves, having that weight on your shoulders can build up in your own stress levels, really. So it's important that you take care of yourself too. So, a few statistics for you. First of all, 1 in 10 school children have a diagnosable mental health condition. We don't diagnose children that easily because they're still growing, they're still developing, their personalities are forever shaping. But 1 in 10 have that diagnosable mental health condition. It's an astonishing figure. 75% of us, so 3/4 of people who are having problems, aren't receiving any treatment at all. So they're people you and I will come across in our day-to-day lives and our day-to-day roles, and they're just not getting any support from anywhere else, which makes our support so crucial. The average for effective treatment for mental health problems is a whopping 10 years. That is an astonishing figure. Lots of reasons behind that. The fact that people don't tell anyone, they don't share that, the fact that it takes sometimes so long to get into some services, and then we're all unique. So we will all respond in different ways to different types of support. Mental health is the single largest cause of disability in the UK. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think about disability, I do have a stereotypical view that pops into my head. Mental health isn't necessarily one of those, but it is the largest, which is quite a whopping amount. So there's some statistics that shows us that actually it is a real problem. It is a real problem out there. It's ever increasing. The pandemic has not helped this aspect, so it's important we know a little bit more about it. You might be sitting there wondering about diagnosis. Where do they come in? What does it mean? And it does mean something, and it's helpful for us to understand some conditions. And I will talk through a couple of them in a minute. But actually, we've got to remember that mental health and mental well-being is a spectrum. We have all the way from good well-being to poor well-being, and any of us can be on that spectrum at any point in our lives, and any day really we can fluctuate, and that can fluctuate, oops, wrong way, whether you have a diagnosis, so you can feel perfectly well, perfectly able to cope with life, you're enjoying yourself, you're accessing the things that you would normally do, and you're motivated and all of those things, and you can do that with or without a mental health diagnosis. And equally, you can be struggling, you can be not coping, you're not happy, you're anxious, you're sad, you're afraid, all of those things with or without a diagnosis. So whilst diagnoses are important and they help us understand someone, don't get too hung up on it, because we can all be anywhere on that. Okay, so some stress symptoms. Stress can be broadly defined into 3 different types of symptoms, and it's really important that we recognise what they are. First of all, we have the physical symptoms of stress. So we have all those headaches, and you might have felt those yourselves at various times. We have that muscle tension or pain because we're always tense, aren't we? We're always just wound up inside of ourselves. We might have stomach problems. We might have that thumping heartbeat, or it feels like our chest is going to cave in. We might have sexual problems, lots of physical problems around stress. And then we have what's going on up here. So we might feel really overwhelmed. So we find it difficult to concentrate, difficult to make decisions. We might constantly forget something. We're just worried all the time. We can't get it out of our mind, whatever it is that we feel stressed about. And then we have what we're behaving like. And this is where we can really pick up in other people some of those behavioral aspects. So irritable and snappy. Perhaps some people are more irritable and snappy than others, aren't they? Naturally, but a worsening of that. Maybe somebody who's, you think they're just in bed all the time, or they're not sleeping enough, they're struggling to sleep, they're eating too much or too little. Maybe they're turning to something like alcohol or smoking more because they're constantly worrying, and they might start to avoid places. So these are stress symptoms that we really need to watch out for in other people as well as ourselves. So how can we support someone? First of all, it's definitely easier to spot the signs of stress in someone else than it is to see in ourselves. And because of that, many people plow on, regardless of the symptoms, regardless of the warning signs, until it just becomes unmanageable and they tip over. So, helping someone recognize the problem is a good first step. Listening, absolutely listening to somebody's stressed and they've got it all in their head and they're thinking about it, and it's closely linked to obviously part of anxiety, then actually being able to talk through what it is can help somebody think about finding new solutions, or just even knowing someone's there to listen can help us deal with what's going on. We do need to offer reassurance when you're feeling really overwhelmed. It's really difficult to see a way out of a problem, and over the current situation that we've all been through, hopefully there is very much a light at the end of the tunnel now, but it can be difficult to see that. And so it's about us saying, this isn't going to last forever. The situation can improve, and that's regardless of whatever somebody else is stressed about. Helping someone identify their triggers. So what are you picking up? Bit of a sensitive topic because you may be picking up on certain negative type behaviors, but if you can help them pick up on their triggers, you can stop them reaching crisis point again. If we can offer practical support, then that's great. If we have got somebody who's struggling with debt, or maybe they are got relationship problems and those sorts of things are causing them stress, then can we pinpoint some services or help or support that's available to them? Helping someone relax. So, really important part of dealing with stress is being able to relax ourselves. Different techniques work for different people. There is mindfulness out there. If you've heard of that, it's a really good way of focusing on the here and now and the present. For some people, breathing exercises can work. Some people have other things that can help them with their stress. Maybe it's certain things that they like to do. There are some apps out there. I'll talk about that a bit later if that might be useful as well. And then finally, if we know that somebody is really starting to tip towards the edge, then support them to see their GP to get some proper professional support. So those are all ways that we can support somebody who is struggling. So I'm going to move on to anxiety. It's very much part of that. So I want you just to reflect to yourself just for a second, a time when you felt really, really, really worried about something. Maybe it's the results of some tests. Maybe it's something to do with yourself, somebody else within your life. Maybe you're really worried something's going to happen, or that something might not happen. I want you to think to yourself, what did that feel like? What was going on inside you? What was going on up there? What was going on in your head when you were feeling that anxiety? And what was going on in your body? What physiological symptoms were you having? We've all experienced anxiety at times. I'm sure you will have all come up with some things that you've thought of. You may well, have had panic attacks. It may be that your anxiety has got to the stage where you struggle to breathe, you struggle to catch your breath. You may well feel restless, just can't really relax, can't sit down. You're feeling tense all the time. You might feel disconnected with everything that's going on, like the world's moving on without you, and you're really stuck in this present moment. You may feel that the world is speeding up or it's slowing down and you're not really part of it. You may feel that you're sweating when you're getting really anxious and nervous about something. You might need reassurance for someone. You might need whether physical touch or somebody to give you some words of encouragement or support. You may get that churning in the stomach, those butterflies as you're starting to think about this particular thing. You might be overthinking things. You might get pins and needles across your body. You might feel dizzy, lightheaded. You might get headaches and other aches because you're feeling so tense and so wound up about things. You might feel sick, or you might actually even be sick. You might get that sense of dread, that awful feeling in the pit of your stomach and in the center of your body when you feel something awful is going to happen. You might be worrying about the fact you're worrying, and you might be lying there in bed thinking, if I don't get to sleep now, I'm not going to get up in the morning. If I don't get up in the morning, I can't do this, I can't do that. And it goes over and over in your mind. Your breathing might get faster. You might get a fast thumping heartbeat or palpitations. You might have problems sleeping. I'm sure many of you will have had those symptoms at some point. Feeling anxious is normal, and it's a normal state that we will all have at times in our lives, and we will all experience. Everyone has times when they feel worried or afraid about something. So when does it become a mental health problem? Well, first of all, if your feelings or anxiety are really strong, or they last a very long time, and perhaps they're totally out of proportion to the situation. Maybe they're so strong about what other people might think is a minor thing. You might start to avoid things, situations, places, people, because you just can't cope with the anxiety that comes from that. You might have some regular or frequent experience of symptoms of anxiety, and that might include the panic attacks. And you just start to find it difficult to go about your everyday life because that anxiety is starting to overwhelm you. So that's anxiety and what it looks like, and I'm sure we'll recognise it. And everybody, I'm quite sure, has felt anxious at some point over the last year. But hopefully it might help you identify those people who are starting to get some serious mental health issues around anxiety. Okay, so another anxiety that's quite specific is obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. You may well have heard at some point in your life, because it's perfectly normal for people to say, I'm so OCD. So what does it mean? I'm going to show you a very short video that demonstrates the difference between OCD and what might be termed perfectionism, and also what the story that is with OCD shows, how it shows up. It says very much in this video. Okay.
This is Ray. She's a perfectionist. This is Lauren. She has obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. Ray tidies up her room before she goes to work and then goes on her way. Lauren can't leave her room until everything is just right. This causes her so much anxiety, she's often late for work. Ray's friends make fun of her because she can't eat lunch until she washes her hands first. When Lauren washes her hands before lunch, it's because she can't shake the image of becoming seriously ill if she doesn't do it repeatedly. Driving home, a thought pops into Ray's head that she might have hit someone with her car. Quickly, though, she dismisses the thought. When Lauren drives home, the same thought pops into her head, but unlike Ray, she can't dismiss it. She actually turns her car around to make sure she didn't hit anybody. Before going to bed, Ray counts sheep. Counting calms her, and she's able to relax and go to sleep. Lauren's nightly ritual revolves around the number 3. Lauren finally falls asleep at 4 a.m. when the ritual is complete. Everyone experiences irrational thoughts, and maybe even performs ritualistic behaviors. But for people with OCD, these thoughts are excessive, and these behaviors can take over their lives. So before you say, "I'm so OCD," remember that OCD is not an adjective, but a real condition that deserves compassion and understanding.
Okay, so hopefully that gave you a good understanding of the difference between OCD and perfectionism. Okay, so obsessions and compulsions, how do they work? So obsessions occur when somebody has persistent and unpleasant thoughts that really dominates their thinking, almost to the extent that it interrupts all other thoughts. And they can be vary, as you've seen in there. It could be fear of deliberately hurting yourself or others, or fear of accidentally hurting yourself or others, maybe contamination by disease or infection, or a real need for symmetry or orderliness. And that goes on in the head. So where compulsions come in is their behaviors that start to try and stop the obsessions happening. So somebody starts to do something to try and stop or prevent the anxiety in the first place, or the thoughts going on in somebody's head. So there might be things like cleaning and hand washing, checking, counting, ordering and arranging, hoarding, asking for reassurance, repeating words in their head, all of those things. And then, as it said in that video, starts to take over somebody's life. And emotions come in because it is something that causes people a great deal of anxiety and distress by having to deal with that on a day-to-day basis, hour in, hour out. So that's obsessive compulsive disorder. The last topic I really wanted to talk about before we move into some of the other stuff is around depression. And again, with depression, lots of people experience times when they're really sad, they're blue, they're unhappy, they're low, they've got the Monday morning blues, all of those things. And again, we will have all experienced that during the last year. So when does it start to become more of a serious problem? So I've got another short video to show you, and this is a really good video because it talks about the black dog, and you may well have heard of the black dog as a name for depression, and this demonstrates what it means. Okay, so let me just start it.
I had a black dog. His name was Depression. Whenever the black dog made an appearance, I felt empty and life just seemed to slow down. He could surprise me with a visit for no reason or occasion. The black dog made me look and feel older than my years. When the rest of the world seemed to be enjoying life, I could only see it through the black dog. Activities that usually brought me pleasure suddenly ceased to. He liked to ruin my appetite. He chewed up my memory and my ability to concentrate. Doing anything or going anywhere with the black dog required superhuman strength. At social occasions, he'd sniff out what confidence I had and chase it away. My biggest fear was being found out. I worried that people would judge me. Because of the shame and stigma of the black dog, I was constantly worried that I'd be found out. So I invested vast amounts of energy into covering him up. Keeping up an emotional lie is exhausting. Black dog could make me think and say negative things. He could make me irritable and difficult to be around. He would take my love and bury my intimacy. He loved nothing more than to wake me up with highly repetitive and negative thinking. He also liked to remind me how exhausted I was going to be the next day. Having a black dog in your life isn't so much about feeling a bit down, sad or blue. At its worst, it's about being devoid of feeling altogether. As I got older, the black dog got bigger and he started hanging around all the time. I'd chase him off with whatever I thought might send him running. But more often than not, he'd come out on top. Going down became easier than getting up again. So I became rather good at self-medication, which never really helped. Eventually, I felt totally isolated from everything and everyone. The black dog had finally succeeded in hijacking my life. When you lose all joy in life, you can begin to question what the point of it is. Thankfully, this was the time that I sought professional help. This was my first step towards recovery and a major turning point in my life. I learned that it doesn't matter who you are, the black dog affects millions and millions of people. It is an equal opportunity mongrel. I also learned that there was no silver bullet or magic pill. Medication can help some, and others might need a different approach altogether. I also learned that being emotionally genuine and authentic to those who are close to you can be an absolute game changer. Most importantly, I learnt not to be afraid of the black dog, and I taught him a few new tricks of my own. The more tired and stressed you are, the louder he barks, so it's important to learn how to quiet your mind. It's been clinically proven that regular exercise can be as effective for treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants, so go for a walk or a run and leave the mutt behind. Keep a mood journal. Getting your thoughts on paper can be cathartic and often insightful. Also keep track of the things that you have to be grateful for. The most important thing to remember is that no matter how bad it gets, if you take the right steps, talk to the right people, black dog days can and will pass. I wouldn't say that I'm grateful for the black dog, but he's been an incredible teacher. He forced me to reevaluate and simplify my life. I learnt that rather than running away from my problems, it's better to embrace them. The black dog may always be part of my life, but he'll never be the beast that he was. We have an understanding. I've learned through knowledge, patience, discipline and humour, the worst black dog can be made to heal. If you're in difficulty, never be afraid to ask for help. There is absolutely no shame in doing so. The only shame is missing out on life.
Okay, so a really good demonstration of what life is like with depression. So some of the things I wanted just to pick up from that is, he said, obviously he didn't share because he thought people would judge him. So that stigma is still very much there. I love the phrase, depression is an equal opportunities mongrel. It doesn't matter what your life is like. It doesn't matter if you apparently have a great life, if you've got a job, if you've got a family, if you've got enough money, or whether you haven't, it can affect anyone. He also mentioned a couple of self-care things. So learn how to quiet your mind. Be aware that when you're tired and stressed, that actually that's when things like mental health issues may come along and hit you a little harder. So having some techniques there, having some self-care options is so important. And what he mentioned about exercise, clinically proven to be as effective of treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants. Maybe it's the last thing somebody feels like doing is going for a walk or a run when they're feeling really, really low, but just taking that first step can make a real difference to somebody. So some of the things he mentioned in the symptoms, I think he mentioned most of those. All of those things are things to watch out for when somebody else, and if you think that somebody's starting to head into depression. The last thing I want to talk about before we talk about communication is probably the most taboo topic of all, which is around suicide. It is important that we do talk about it. We do have 1 in 10 people across Staffordshire who do lose their lives through suicide every month, and it is a problem that we need to be aware of. So I'm going to address some myths around suicide. So first of all, some people might say, well, people who talk about suicide, they're not serious, they're not going to go through it. Well, actually, people who have committed suicide have often told somebody that they don't feel life is worth living anymore, or they have no future. Some may have actively said they want to die. So it is important that we take it seriously when somebody says something. If a person's serious about killing themselves, well, there's no point doing anything. There's nothing you can do. Their mind is made up. Well, actually, for people, feeling suicidal is temporary, even though they've been feeling low or anxious or struggling to cope for some time. So getting the right support at the right time is so important. You have to be mentally ill to think about suicide, and Mrs. Jones, she doesn't feel like that. Well, again, yes, some people with mental health issues do commit suicide, but others do it for other reasons entirely. Don't assume that you have to be mentally ill to think about it. People who are suicidal want to die. Actually, not necessarily. People who are suicidal quite often don't want to die, but they don't want to continue living the life that they're living. that distinction might seem quite slight, but it is important because actually they want to change their lives or see a change in their lives, or perhaps can't see a way out, rather than they actively want to die. So again, getting the right sort of help is so important. Talking about suicide, it's a bad idea. It might give someone the chance, the idea to try it. Again, with people who are suicidal, they often keep things up here. It's in their heads, and they don't tell anyone because they don't want to burden anyone. They don't want to worry anyone, particularly those who are close to them. So asking somebody about it gives the opportunity to say what's going on in their minds. And people who've actually been able to talk about it say they feel a sense of relief. That burden lifts a little bit because they can talk to somebody openly about what they're feeling. People who say they're going to take their own life, they're just attention seeking and shouldn't be taken seriously. And you may well have heard the term cry for help. And absolutely, people who both talk about suicide and attempt suicide is often a cry for help, but it still means that something is going on there. Something is happening to that person that they need some support with. But equally, it could mean they're absolutely serious. We should always, always take it seriously. 1 in 17 of us, that's nearly 20%, 1 in 17 have thought about suicide at some point in our lives, which is again a phenomenal figure and why we should be more open about it. So there is a national acronym for us to remember when we're thinking about suicide, which is WAIT. First of all, to watch out in other people for signs of distress or behaviour that's changed in some way or other. To asking somebody can be difficult, but it is important that we do so. It gives that person an opportunity to say what's going in their heads. And if they're not thinking about it, they're just going to say, oh, don't be so daft, I'd hardly be thinking about that. It will pass. Reassure somebody that those feelings will pass. They are temporary for lots of people. And encourage people to get some help. So where can we get those from? So these are 3 links. I'm just going to briefly show you where we can get some support from and some more knowledge ourselves. So first of all, this has been produced by Staffordshire County Council. It's the Talk Suicide Sources of Campaign booklet. We can either have this as a download PDF or we can print it off. Obviously, if it's an emergency or urgent help, these are the numbers right at the top that we'd need to call. And then there's lots of information about what local support there is. So lots of organisations who will support somebody who is suicidal. It's got Samaritan's Childline, Shout and all of that. And then if you know somebody's got specific issues that's related to their thoughts, then there are some more national helplines that we can ring, as well as some local ones. So that might be quite useful for you to have about you. The second link is the Staffordshire County Council talking about suicide page. Talks about how to ask somebody about it. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about dying? Are you thinking about suicide? Asking lots of questions down there and getting professional help. And on the right hand side, there's a few different links there, but the top one is some suicide prevention community training, which I believe is still taking place. Apologies if I've got that wrong. It is run by North Staffordshire Mind, and it's a half-day course that talks a lot more about suicide prevention. And finally, the final link, this is about a 30-40 minute online course that's run by Zero Suicide Alliance, and it's got lots more information for you on that topic. So that might be quite helpful. Okay, go back to my PowerPoint. Okay, so I'm going to talk about communication now. So we've done lots and lots about different health conditions, what mental health is, and also suicide. So I've got this quote to begin. For any of you who know To Kill a Mockingbird, you may recognise as a quote from Atticus Finch, who is the hero of that story. So you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb in his skin and walk around in it. I love that quote because for me it says so much. It says a lot about really understanding or attempting to understand the perspective of another person, their truth, if you like, their view of the world, and not to put our own judgments on it and our own values, beliefs, opinions, thoughts, all of those things, but think, okay, that validating how somebody else is feeling or their thoughts. Okay, yep, lovely. Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. Okay, so how do we communicate? First of all, yeah, be yourself. Don't try and pretend to be something you're not. If you don't know something, say you don't know it. And I'm quite happy to do that to people. You know, do you know what? I don't know the answer, but let me see if I can find out and try and do that. So be non-judgmental. What may seem like a really small problem to you or a really small situation might be enormous to somebody else. It's not for us to judge, and it's not for us to judge somebody else's lifestyle, their behavior, or anything like that. It's about us just supporting someone. Absolutely tell somebody it is going to get better. This will pass. Be straight and to the point. If you're starting to ask some quite sensitive questions, maybe all the way through to suicide, yeah, don't and ah around it. Just come out and say it. Let them set the pace. Don't push somebody. Don't push somebody to reveal more than they're ready to reveal to you. And allow them for some pauses so they can gather their thoughts and think about what it is they want to say. Reflect on what they've got to say. In other words, try and paraphrase what they're saying to you so that you really understand their perspective. It's about that, really. So it sounds like you feel anxious. It sounds like the situation is causing you really real difficulties. Try and reflect emotion within that as well. Using a calm and steady voice. If somebody starts to tell you that some awful things happening or they're having some thoughts that aren't very good, then maintaining your own composure, controlling your own emotions is so important. I've said already, don't trivialize their problem. Consider your body language if you are face to face with somebody, so good eye contact, good open posture in your body, all of those things. Ask them what they would find helpful. So, how can I support you? What sort of support do you feel you need in your life at the moment? What would have to change to make you feel in a different place? So part of it's empowering somebody, but part of it is not us imposing our own thoughts and opinions and deciding on an action for somebody else. It's about saying, what's right for you? What's right for you to go forward? Don't be put off if the first reaction is negative. So if you ask somebody, you know, I'm feeling really worried about you, are you okay? And they go, yep, I'm fine. Ask again, ask again. Just always do that. You follow your gut instinct about somebody. So some things you can say, some phrases, obviously you might put these in your own words and your own language. So I'm really worried about you. You seem really sad and tired. Do you want to talk about it? So this is showing them that you're recognizing that their emotions are not in a good place or they are starting to struggle a little bit and opening the door for conversation. I hope you don't mind me asking about this. I really want to understand how things are for you. So again, we're showing somebody that we really want to understand their perspective, their view on the world, and it gives them opportunity to really say that. I need to know you're safe, but I don't need to know everything. How can we do this? So this might be a situation where you feel really worried about somebody's safety. Maybe they're at risk in some way or other, and you just want to make sure that they're going to be safe in their current situation. Maybe you're worried about suicidal thoughts. And again, this is something else you could say. How can we do this? You're putting the ball back into their hands. Today hasn't been great, but you know what? It might help to focus on tomorrow. What can you do to feel a bit better? So this is acknowledging that not every day is going to be a bed of roses, because it's certainly not. So what can that person do? And remembering what works for some people is different to others to help them feel a bit better. What can they plan to do? Is it a helpline? Is it some self-care? Is it a technique? Is it a bit of mindfulness? Whatever it might do, what can that person do to focus on, okay, let's let's draw a line under that. Let's move forward, think how we can have a better day tomorrow. Would it help if we talked again sometime? Maybe we can talk about how I can help you. So this is leaving the door open, isn't it? Come back, have a chat to me at any point. Have you thought about what you want to do now? Where do you want to go from here? So again, putting the ball back into that person's court. Maybe you've given them a range of options and a range of different things that they can do, both for themselves, but also outside services. So what is it they're going to focus on? What action can they actually take? So hopefully that's given you some good ideas there. Unhelpful statements, so things we absolutely wouldn't be saying. I know how you feel. You can't know how somebody else feels. You really can't. You may have been there. You may know what it's like there. And the video I'm going to show you in a minute does say that. I know what it's like down here. So I know what it's like to be depressed. I know what it's like to feel really low. I know what it's like to feel anxious. But you can't know how somebody feels. You're not them. You haven't experienced things in the same way. You've got a great life. What you got to feel sad about? Again, not a helpful statement. They might have a great life, and actually that might make them feel worse, because they might think, well, I'm not even grateful for what I have got, have I? So that's not a helpful phrase. Things aren't that bad. Again, you're trivializing and not validating somebody else's thoughts and emotions. At least, ... You'll see that in the video in a minute. And this happened to me. So very occasionally it might be helpful to share our own experience, but this isn't what it's about. It's about supporting that person in their circumstances with their perspective on the world. So helpful statements, I've already said a lot of these as well. It's okay if I don't want to talk now. I'm here whenever. So some helpful statements. Okay, I've got another video to show you. Again, really short. I love this video. I've seen it, I don't know how many times, lots and lots of times. It's the difference between empathy and sympathy, and it does really highlight the at least statement, but it gives us an idea of how we might talk to somebody and how we might really empathize with an individual.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay, so really good video. I hope you enjoyed that. From Brené Brown, who does a lot of good videos and a lot of good stuff around these kind of topics. Okay, so we talked about communication now. I'm just going to broadly go through some wellbeing tools and things that we can all help ourselves to do, but also help and encourage other people to do. And they might seem quite basic, but as it said right at the beginning, sometimes small things can make a big difference. So, first of all, staying connected with others. Isolation isn't great for us, is it? We're not meant for isolation. We are social animals when it comes down to it. Really tricky, of course, given the current climate and where we've been over the past year. But if people can still stay in contact to those that they like, their friends with, their family, whether by phone, video, if necessary, anything like that, then that connection does help on mental well-being. Helping and support others. So anybody who's ever done any volunteering knows actually it's really good for our mental well-being because it helps us give something back. It makes us feel better ourselves. We're more valued. We have more purpose in life. We feel better sense of self-esteem generally. Talking about the anxieties, getting it out of our heads. It's a difficult time for everyone, and sharing how we're feeling now can help us. Even if there is no real solution, it at least stops it running around over and over and over in our heads. Looking after our physical health and our sleep. It can be something that can go quite easily when every day is pretty much the same and you don't really have to go up and go here for this or there for that because do you know what? You're not really getting out of the house. So maintaining regular routines, still eating well, all of those things have a good impact on our mental well-being. Managing information intake and getting the facts. So if somebody is feeling very anxious about it, and there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy now and a lot of stuff going around social media around vaccines, other people might be glued to the news 24/7, watching for the very latest bit of word that comes out about stuff. Both of those things are not good for our mental well-being. So first of all, managing information intake, staying off social media as much as we can, limiting our viewing of the news channel or papers to a reasonable amount is good, and getting the facts behind things. So if there's lots of misinformation that's spread, lots of conspiracy theories, find places where you can get trustworthy news and information, and I cover that quite a bit on the Clear About COVID session. Keeping a daily routine, I've already said, and continuing to do things that we enjoy, albeit maybe in a completely different way than we would have done well over a year ago now. But can we do stuff online? Can we continue to do stuff? Can we learn stuff? Can we set goals? Can we do all of those things and keep the mind active? And getting out, back to that video, exercise is important. If we can just walk around the block, walk around a local area, a nature reserve. Nature is great, and it's right now, we're in spring, everything's starting to blossom and bloom. It makes you feel better. So all of those things are important. I have a wellbeing tool that I'm going to send out with the slides, and it's a stress bucket exercise. It's a wellbeing tool. And what you do is you can actually do this using a bucket and stones. I've done this before with young people, and water. But you could do it as well on paper. Basically, you have a bucket and you start to write in it or pop rocks in it or whatever you might do that represent all parts of your life that's got stress related to it. It may be health, it may be family, it may be work, it may be schools and education, it may be tests, it may be lots of things. So you pop all of that in, and everybody's got stress in their lives. Then whop in a big load of other rocks or pieces of paper, or write a big part of it that says pandemic, because that's come along and plunked in our bucket. And see how far near the top you are, because actually when our bucket fills up, the tiniest thing can come along and tip us right over the edge. And you may well have been there yourself. You may have just lost it because somebody has just said something slightly the wrong way or put that little bit of extra stress or pressure on you, and suddenly you've gone boom. The point of using the stress bucket is also to think about there's a tap at the bottom where we can start to release some of the stress, where we can start to think of what coping strategies have we got, both helpful and unhelpful, where we can release some of that tension in our lives. For some people, it might be having a bath, reading a book, doing some exercise, watching a movie and escaping. There's lots of ways that we can all manage our stress. For me personally, a day out in the countryside, having a good walk is going to help me manage my stress. It won't solve any of my problems, but I'm going to come back in a better frame of mind than when I went out. So that's a really good activity to do. And please do look after yourself. If you're in a role where you are constantly supporting other people, that is an emotionally demanding role. Please think about your own self-care too. You may sit there and think, ooh, I don't know what strategies I might use. I don't know where to think about starting. Well, this is actually taken from Time to Change. It's part of a bingo game. You can ignore that. But what you can do is look at those things on that card and think, okay, then what would be good for me? What would help me? What of all of those things would work for me? Some will, some won't. We are all unique. We are all individual. So have a look at those. Okay, so I said right at the end, I'm going to show you some resources, and indeed I am. I'm just going to show you very briefly what they all are. Get back to my link. So the first one is to Mind. This is the National Mind charity, and I've picked this for one reason really, but there's lots of other good things in here. So types of mental health problems, for example, that's lots of PDFs on a lot of different diagnosed problems, way beyond what I've talked about today. It's about drugs, but this is why, mainly because I've got that link in about helping someone else. So what can you do to help someone else? So you might know you've got somebody with post-traumatic stress disorder, for example. Pop in there and you will find out lots of information of how to support somebody with that specific issue. So that's really good. The second link is to Staffordshire Connect. You may well be familiar with this if you've been on one of my courses around this, sessions around this. We can go into our adults and communities, go through to health and wellness, and look at mental well-being. And this will give us all the local services within Staffordshire. Some of the national charities, some are statutory services, some are voluntary services. So lots of different options there if you don't know where to look. The third link's to NHS, getting support. So there's loads of mental health charity helplines on here, so going through from A to Z, and then it goes into specific areas as we scroll down, so abuse, alcohol misuse, Alzheimer's, and it goes on and on and on down the page. The next link is, I mentioned the apps, so we can get mental well-being apps that might work for some people, it might not work for others, where you can do meditation on there, you can do mindfulness exercises. If you're stressed because you're so overwhelmed with lots of different tasks that you've got to do, work, home life, everything else, there's lots of organising apps, there's loads of stuff out there that we can use, and this just helps us find ones that are good, that are really good. So you can either search for something there, or you can just pop into the wherever it is, I think it'd be the next one, mental health apps there, and see what's available for you. The next link is to looking after ourselves. If we know somebody who's in still quite a lot of isolation, then what can they do at home to best look after themselves? Lots of information on this page about that, including making sure people are eating and drinking well, they're taking the medication, as well as some stuff around mental well-being. Nearly there. I've popped this Time to Change in just so you know where I got it from, but also because it's got some really good resources if you are part of an organisation whereby you want to talk more about mental well-being. There is stuff that you can download, free materials for starters, but then resources for your workplace. So lots of different things that you can do and activities, and this is where I got that bingo thing from. So certainly have a look there because that's quite useful. The final link is to fullfacts.org. So if you are wanting to look for a good source of information that tells you about the latest thing or bit of information that's scaring people half to death on the internet, then this is a really good place to start. So it's got specific topics around coronavirus and vaccines here, or it's just got some latest facts that have been checked, and it looks like it tells you kind of the facts behind it. So back early on in lockdown last year, there was lots of things going around social media about we're going into martial law because there was pictures of the military marching down a high street. Actually, they looked at the details behind that photo and saw that that was just an ordinary daily exercise that was done by a local I forget what you call it, but the local military service that was based there. That's the word I was looking for. So really well worth looking at, that is. So those are all the links there, so you can go and follow them if you've seen anything today that's been usefully helpful. Okay, I am bang on just about 12 o'clock, so I'll just tell you about the other 2 sessions that we've got. The Clear About COVID. So if you want the information about that, there's a lot about vaccines in there, so if you want some information about what is going on with vaccines and what the myths are around it, then that's certainly one place to go. And then we have the combined sessions about signposting, very, very basic, what awareness should we have of safeguarding, and something around daily living equipment or assistive technology. Thank you all for attending today, and I may well see you in the future, so do take care.